According to my watch, we're only 2 minutes behind schedule. Just two. The CP time is not as egregious this week. Um, Welcome to another show. It's a Monday night. Y'all don't want to watch no Monday football. Aaron Rodgers might not last more than 4 plays again. But yeah, I'm Kendrick. This is Chris. That's Jared Hoffman. Thanks for joining us. A lot to get into tonight. We're going to recap week 2 of the HBCU football season. A lot of great football games. Division 1 versus Division 2 happened this weekend. A lot of surprisingly close games, and one of them we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. Yeah, so start off, fellas. What do we make of the weekend so far? From your standpoint, what was the best and worst that y'all saw on Saturday? Starting with Chris.
Well, I have to be I didn't get a chance to ask Damon Wilson about it this morning because during the MEAC coaches call, Xfinity once again did what Xfinity does. So, but Morgan State, they went from scoring 30 points against Hampton to 9 against Towson. So their offense is still cause for concern for me. I want to pick this team to win the MEAC so bad, but as we have said countless times on this program, they are an offense away, and we still don't know if that offense is with us in 2024. So I wouldn't call that the worst. I would call that my point of concern. The best, however, was me. I tuned into the Big Cat Classic. If you folks are not familiar, that is the NAIA Division II battle between Florida Memorial and Edward Waters. And for the third straight year, the NAIA won. Florida Memorial beat Edward Waters 31-21. They had over 300 yards on the ground. And what Bobby Rome II has done in turning that program around and making them, because they were 6-4 last year. They had one of the top offenses in NAIA last year, but they couldn't stop a nosebleed. But this year, the only reason Edward Waters scored 21 points is because they had 2 nice punt returns and kick returns. They got them close enough to where they could score without much, issue. But feels like that Florida Memorial team is one we should watch out for in NAIA. So those are my 2 points of interest for the week. Still a lot of football left to be played, as we'll discuss in this show, but those are 2 things I take away from this weekend.
Yeah, Jared Hoffman, what did you see over the weekend that kind of piques your interest?
Well, there was one game that was better than all the rest that I believe we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think the most impressive thing for me was the Division Division 1 teams that handled their business against the Division 2 teams. That a lot of games weren't close. There was one that was close that I'll talk about in a second. But Alabama State handled its business against Miles. Jackson State, they disappointed Kendrick by not getting the shutout, but they made it clear they did not make that game close. Norfolk State, had its troubles with Virginia State, but they got the win in that one. And so I think that's the good from the weekend. I think probably the bad from the weekend is that the SIAC hasn't been as competitive in out-of-conference games, specifically against the CIAA. I know Kendrick wants me to get into something a little bit later about the CIAA's wins over the SIAC, but I think that it's a bit concerning that the SIAC hasn't been as good in their out-of-conference games, and I wasn't happy with Clark Atlanta's performance against Allen. Again, I'll get into that later, but I wasn't happy with Clark Atlanta's performance. They won, which is what matters, but I think there are some things that they need to improve on if they want to increase their chances of being competitive in the SIAC going forward.
Yeah, my best and worst of the weekend, Jared kind of mentioned it. Jackson State putting up 58 points on Lane over the weekend in the home opener. The worst of the weekend was actually giving the touchdown to Lane in the fourth quarter. over the weekend, like, hey man, y'all got to tighten up, man. Y'all up 58 points. Y'all gotta want to shut out more than anything else, man. It's about pride at that point, man. It would have been cool to watch them win by 58 points, man.
This reminds me of a real quick story before we go. Get into the rest of the show. Once upon a time, Delaware State had a coach named John McKenzie, and they went up to Hofstra, and this is back when Hofstra actually was decent, and they lost the game. I want to say 68-0, and McKenzie went to the media afterwards and said he was disappointed that Hofstra took it easy on them. Now, mind you, you're the coach of the team that lost by 68 points. So the question is, how bad did you want your team to get beat to prove a point? And that just really just boggled the mind to hear as a young college student, like, yo, bro, we literally just lost by like 10 touchdowns. Like, why are you asking them to pull you back off the bus for more? So hearing Kendrick talk about that, I would hope Lane's coach doesn't share the same sentiment as John McKenzie. Hopefully he was happy to just get out of there with his guys healthy and live to fight another day.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know no school wants to be a part of a beatdown that way, but you learn your lessons, and anytime you go on the football field, any sporting event, you might get embarrassed, man. It's bound to happen one of these days, and it happened to Lane College. And unfortunately, Jack State had to administer the beating. So on behalf of the university, I apologize for that. We'll take the win, but I apologize for the way it happened. Which kind of leads me into my next topic. It's been 2 weeks in for most teams, 3 weeks for others. And I was wondering, like, do we kind of know, like, how good or bad some of these teams are, considering that the schedules have been kind of wonky? You got some schools playing, like, all non-conference opponents the first couple weeks of the season, either playing high-level FCS schools or they playing, like, multiple FBS schools in a row, making road trips to those places. Or some schools are playing, like, FCS, and then they're playing D2 or NAIA schools. Like, at this point of the season, like, do we know, like, what schools right now are real? Like, are they really that good? Is Alabama, excuse me, not Alabama, is Arkansas Pine Bluff really the team that lost by 70 points, or are the team that won by 70 points? Like how do we know, like, what's the real deal with them? I'm gonna use Jackson for an example. Are they the school that they'll play really good against an FBS opponent, or are they a dominant team like they played against Lane College? Like how can we tell, like, what's the deal with these teams? Starting with Jared.
I don't think we know who is really good like any other season until we get into conference play. I don't think I think we can tell that Florida A&M is the real deal because they beat two very good opponents in Norfolk State and South Carolina State. That's comparable competition. Until teams start playing comparable competition, we won't know who's good. UAPB beating Arkansas Baptist. Anybody in the SWAC could have done that to Arkansas Baptist. Any team in the MEAC, heck, any team in the CIAA or SIAC could have done that to Arkansas Baptist. No disrespect to Arkansas Baptist, but that's not the team that I'm judging a CIAA or SIAC or SWAC or MEAC team against. Now, if they played against Langston, if they played against Texas College, teams that are in their similar standing, then I would know how good they were if they did that to Arkansas Baptist. But a team that is expected to beat an Arkansas Baptist like that, I'm not moved by that. I need to see UAPB against Southern. I need to see them against PV, Alcorn, so on and so forth. So I don't think we will know how good any of these teams are until we see them against comparable competition.
Yeah, the boss, Kieran Rashad, chimes in, lamenting how Grambling State got outscored 17-0 in their double-digit win over Tuskegee over the weekend. He's embodying the spirit of head coach Mickey Joseph, who today on the SWAC call said Grambling was a bad football team. This after they beat Tuskegee. He called himself a perfectionist and said, like, they're a bad football team. He was not happy with the way that game ended on Saturday. And Ken Rashad, who's a proud Grambling alum, shares that sentiment. Chris, your thoughts on, like, how we should gauge teams through the first couple weeks of the season so far.
I have to agree with Jared's point. We really don't know who's who and what's what until we get into the meat and potatoes of conference play. I can tell you now that anybody that lost to a Division I this weekend should not be upset. You know, if you're Lane, it happens. If you're Tuskegee, it happens. If you're I guess the only one who should probably be upset is Virginia Union because they led Hampton going into the fourth quarter. So, and Virginia State was pretty close against Norfolk State. So, I mean, those are the only two that could literally be upset and feel like they had the game, you know, a game that they could win. But as far as the FCS schools go, I'm not real. Again, like Jared said, you know, it's comparable competition. Like Jackson State versus Southern next week. That's going to be the tell. Delaware State against Wagner. Granted, they beat a former, you know, a once upon a time FCS playoff team in Sacred Heart, but Wagner is a team that could likely give them fits. That's going to be the tell for Delaware State. It's really just all about everybody playing equal competition, getting in the conference, seeing who, and when even when North Carolina Central goes to Chapel Hill on Saturday, we know that's not going to end well for the Eagles, but we can't, you know, judge them as a football team based upon that. But it's like Jared said, it's really just all about comparable competition. There's really no telling until everyone starts their conference play to see who is who and what is what.
And I think another thing that's important, excuse me, Kendrick, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'll go ahead.
I think the thing that's important is that even when Division II teams have beaten FCS teams, look at last year. Virginia State beat Norfolk State last year. Miles beat Alabama State last year. I think Lane beat UAPB last year or 2 years ago, something like that. None of those teams won their division, let alone their conference. So just because you beat a FCS team, it doesn't tell me anything about you. It doesn't tell me anything about you because you still have to go against your conference's competition. And even if you were to beat an out of conference FCS team or out of conference FBS team, like a PWI FCS team, you still got to go against your conference. So it doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me anything about, whether you're ready to meet that challenge of conquering your conference. You know what I mean? It tells me that you have the tools to do it, but you still have to go out and do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it could be a barometer, but I don't think it's the true tell that a team is ready to be competitive.
Yeah, like talking to James Cozer today in the SWAC media call, he mentioned like how he's going to use the bye week to learn a little bit more about his football team, despite the fact that they played 3 games, won 2. They took one on the chin to the Hurricanes over the weekend, but he said he's going to use this time to like really study his ball club, trying to find out where they are. And he's going to use the bye week to do that. And you got like other coaches like Vincent Brown for North Carolina A&T. They played a really tough ball game against Winston-Salem State. What was the score of that game, fellas? I forgot what the score of that game was. Went to overtime. The score of the game was, Stephen Gaither, our friend.
Oh, my God.
27 to 20. A&T beat WSSU in a game that was really competitive. That was a fantastic game in overtime that the Rams actually led late in that one, and A&T got the game time score and field goal at the end of the game to send to overtime. But hey, man, if you don't know the backstory about this is a receipt that Stephen Gaither, who is a great founder of HBCU Game Day, put up when he chastised all of the HBCU media last week for sleeping on the Rams. And he was right. We did sleep on them. We were all wrong. We were all wrong, Stephen, that the Rams didn't have a chance. They had a lot of chances to win that game on Saturday. They probably should have won that game on Saturday. But no, he was right, man. We should have gave them a little bit more respect. But at the end of the day, you got the receipts that says North Carolina A&T came out with the win on that one. Jerry got the church hand up. What's up?
Can I just say, Steve, I ain't had nothing to do with this.
Me neither.
CIAA unity. This that CIAA. Look, I get it. Bowie, we play Winston-Salem State in a couple weeks. We're going to beat y'all. Don't worry about that. But I ain't had nothing to do with this. I promise. I ain't had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, like I'm just here so I don't get fined. Word to Marshawn Lynch, man. I'm here minding my business.
Just having a
Oh,
little
boy.
fun tonight on Monday
Yeah.
night, man. Yeah, Steve
all
knows we're
love,
good,
all
man.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, all love, yeah. Yeah, but like games like that we just talked about, A&T and Winston-Salem State, like I don't know if they prove anything in the grand scheme of things, but it did have me wondering, like, is A&T really ever going to return back to the way they were before they let Sam Washington go? Because they played decently against Wake Forest to open the season, and I know it's a rivalry game against Winston-Salem State, but they need an overtime to beat a Division II school. And their offense, while they did rush for 250 yards, not very many explosive plays in that game. They seem to take a step back a little bit. And I know Mr. Brown saying, well, like in a rivalry game, you can never be sure to count a win, especially when you're playing down. Just take a look at what happened in Notre Dame over the weekend. But like, I'm like, yeah, that's true and all. But like, you're coming off a season where you guys had one win and everybody was looking for progress. And despite the fact you won the game, I don't know how many people are like happy with the progress of the football team having to struggle to beat a D2 school like that, especially playing a really good conference in the CIAA, not the Confederate Conference like Reggie Floyd said, but the Coastal Conference that they play in. So fellas, does a game like that, like A&T played, can that signal that, hey, this team may be in trouble, or we really can't tell so they get in the conference play? Starting with Chris.
Well, as even after we just roasted Steve Gaither, I think this is more about that Winston-Salem State is back on the upswing more than anything, to be honest with you. I mean, they've had a rough 5 or 6 year period, but I still feel like this is an encouraging sign for Winston-Salem State and less about North Carolina A&T. And I've gone on record on this program saying that them jumping conferences the way they have in Hampton too was not good for the health of their football program. And the sensitivity is going to kick in for a lot of alums of those two schools if they struggle again in the coastal. But the bottom line is you really need to have your ducks in a row if you're going to move up to a PWI conference that has Delaware for at least another year, for Richmond, for Campbell, Elon, New Hampshire, Villanova. You really need to be ready if you think you're ready for this level of competition. Right now, A&T and Hampton have not proved that they are. So it's going to be, people are going to be in the comments mad about it, but they never should have left the MEAC. That's my story. I'll stick to it. Really not too concerned about who's upset about it, but you can just look at the numbers and see that these two teams have struggled mightily outside of, the Big South, outside of the Big South context. They probably should have stayed in the Big South, to be honest with you, if they weren't going to come back to the MEAC. But just moving up to the Coastal and say, hey, we're ready for you guys. And the Coastal's looking down at y'all like, no, you're not. So it's a lesson they're going to have to learn the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't see the correlation in exchange of conferences that's the same way you do in terms of like how they've been playing the first couple of weeks of this season, or even how they played last season. But I go back to where they were one win away from winning the Big South 2 years ago. And since then, they've only won 2 games. I don't know if they're not acquiring the same talent. I don't know whether or not the school probably should have stuck with Sam Washington for a little longer. He did lead them to a Celebration Bowl championship while he was the head coach, filling in for Rob Broadway. I mean, it's something about A&T that they shouldn't be like struggling like this. They really shouldn't. They have the largest black college in America, literally the largest black college in America, and they are in a state that's really good for football. Like you look at the schools right here, especially high schools in the Charlotte area and in the Raleigh-Durham area, they produce really good talent. This is a state, North Carolina, that's very rich with youth football, high school football, even college football. And you want to take South Carolina into it too, you can do that as well. They have very strong football programs too. So I don't know why the last couple of years they've been struggling so much. Maybe the change of conferences did them in. Maybe they should have stayed in the MEAC, but I mean, like they really shouldn't be struggling like this as an institution that they are. Yeah, Chuck chimes in to say he's agreed with Chris about A&T and Hampton. He does not see any progress with them in the CAA.
I think you pointed it out, Kendrick. It's the talent. You look at the season that you're talking about, where they were a game away from winning the Big South. They had Bashal Tootin, who was the conference's leading rusher that year. They had Jacob Roberts, who was also all conference that year. They still had Teron Prunty during that season. And then what happened? They let go of Sam Washington. They go to the CAA. Bashal Tootin enters the transfer portal. He's now at Virginia Tech. Jacob Roberts enters the transfer portal. He goes to Wake Forest. And your talent is depleted. Now, they're still able to keep a running back. I don't know how they keep getting away with it. How do they keep getting these running backs where they get them from? But you look at the overall talent, and it's not good enough. So I'm going to slightly disagree and say I don't think that it's the change of conferences is the reason why they are where they are, because they were competitive out of the conference. It's the fact that they haven't been able to keep the talent in the building, and they don't have the cohesion to be able to compete right now. Had they been able to keep Bashal Tootin, had they been able to keep Jacob Roberts, had they been able to keep all the other guys that entered the transfer portal, the Eli Brockholder, excuse me, I don't mean to say his name wrong, the quarterback that also entered the transfer portal, had they been able to keep all those guys, keep that cohesion, keep those guys, and continue to build with what they had, I think they would be better off than where they were. Does that mean they win the CAA? Who knows? But I know they would be in a much better position than coming off of a 1-10 season and having to fight for their lives to beat Winston-Salem State. Would they be much better off than if they were in the MEAC? Of course they would. But also, who knows if they would be better off in the MEAC right now if they were still in the MEAC? We don't know that for sure. They have, I think they have Norfolk State on their schedule. I think they have I know for sure they have A&T on their schedule. I mean, not A&T, Central on their schedule. So we'll be able to see how they stack up against them. But I'm not sure whether or not the change in the conferences was the difference. I know for sure, though, that the talent leaving was the difference.
Yeah, like there's a lot of sentiment the other way, Jared, about like, hey, like A&T betrayed all black colleges, but going to the CAA or in Big South and leaving behind the MEAC. But they did what was best for them. And we wish them luck, but it's been a real struggle since they left the MEAC for sure. Yeah, now I want to switch topics to something that Jared mentioned earlier about how he feels that one Division II Black conference is better than another Division II Black conference. Jared, explain yourself.
First of all, I got to correct myself. North Carolina A&T doesn't play Norfolk State. They play South Carolina State. That's my mistake. But, hey, look, the numbers don't lie. That's all look, numbers don't lie. The CIAA has just been better than the SIAC. It's true. It's true, guys. I'm sorry. Virginia State, they beat Benedict. Whether you think Benedict is still good right now or not, they beat them. Who's the other one? Johnson C. Smith. They beat Tuskegee and they beat Morehouse. And the game of the weekend, Shaw came back from a 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter to beat the reigning SIAC championship runner-ups last season, Albany State. This game, well, first let me finish my point about CIAA being better than SIAC. Look, the numbers don't lie. Look at the games. The results are there. Whether you want to say it's execution, whether you want to say that's talent, the proof is in the pudding. We have outperformed them in every matchup this year.
He's using we, y'all.
Hey, I'm a product of a CIAA school, so of course I'm going to ride for the CIAA. But just to talk about the Shaw Albany State game, that was the best chance that SIAC had to get a win over the CIAA, and Albany State just couldn't get the job done. And There was just a lot of mistakes that they made down throughout the game, particularly that first score of the game, which was a Shaw safety that was resulted off a Albany State interception. And that's can we take the graphic off the screen? I need to talk to DBs real quick. I need to talk to DBs, and I don't want that graphic being in the way. So can we get the graphic off? Look, DBs. When you get an interception and you are deep into your own end zone, unless there is 10 yards of just grass, kneel down. Kneel down. That one mistake of you trying to make a play out of the end zone cost your team a chance to win that game. If you kneel down, you get the ball on the 20, and you give your offense a chance to produce something with Shaw with their backs against the wall. That one play was the biggest difference between the Albany State being victorious and Albany State losing, because that third quarter was disastrous for Shaw. They gave up 3 consecutive touchdowns after getting an interception on the first drive, but they just could not stop Albany State over the next 3 drives, gave up touchdowns, went up 10. Albany State did, went up 10 going into the fourth quarter, and then Christian Peters happened. Christian Peters just carved them up that entire fourth quarter, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. 27 points they gave up in that fourth quarter. And this is an Albany State team whose identity is defense. And Christian Peters just carved them up. And then that game-winning touchdown. Guys, if you have not seen that play, you need to look it up, because it is one of the most incredible plays I have ever seen. Shout out to my guy, Jamie Walker. He was on the call for that game. And like the rest of us, were just dumbfounded by that amazing play. Christian Peters, has the defense collapsing on him, scrambles around to keep the play alive, and just gets the ball out of there and gets it to his receiver. And the receiver jumps over a defender to get into the end zone for the touchdown. And look, it just showed that the SIAC, they have a ways to go before they are competitive and at the Division II level. You know what I mean? It's been a while since a SIAC team has made a run in the playoffs. I believe it was Tuskegee quite a few years ago. They made it to the regional final quite a few years ago, probably 10 years ago or so. So I think they have a lot of things they got to clean up execution-wise. They have a lot of things they got to clean up discipline-wise. There's too many penalties happening in these games. Granted, it's happening on the CIAA side too, but the CIAA side has been able to execute better down the stretch and get the job done. So all that to say, CIAA is better than the SIAC. Numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie.
Yeah, so Chris, do you agree with that the CIAA is better than the SIAC?
They're better prepared. That's for doggone sure. Like, I caught the last couple minutes of that Shaw Alabama State game, and it was Albany State game, and it was just like, wait a minute, did Albany State forget how to play football? I mean, it was just one of those happenstances, and Jared is right. That play Christian Peters made to Hassan Butcher is probably going to go down as one of the top 10 plays of the year in Black college football. And yes, we still have 10 to 12 weeks to go. But yes, that play is going to go down as one of the top 10 of the season. Just a phenomenal effort by quarterback and receiver to get the job done. What I think also is interesting is that everybody that was supposed to be a big dog in the SIAC, they ain't looking too hot right now. Tuskegee's 0-2. Miles is 0-2. Albany State is 0-2. Edward Waters, my pick, just lost to an NAIA school. The one undefeated in the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference is a team who had not won a game for almost 2 years prior to that. And that is the Clark Atlanta Pyru Panthers. Bick and back being bull on them on that red field, dog. So just think about this. Clark Atlanta at the top of the SIAC through the first 3 weeks of the season. Who had that? So the SIAC is, it may not be pretty football, but it's going to be interesting to see who ends up coming out of that scrum the champion, because I don't think it's going to be anybody that we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, this kind of leads me into the polls that we released, the ultimate Division I and Division II Black College football polls. I'm gonna put up the Division II poll right now, if it's the right one. Oh, it's Division I. Division II poll. We have Virginia Union number 1, JCSU number 2, Clark Atlanta, the surprise, number 3, Fayetteville State is 4th, Shaw is 5th, Virginia State is 6th, West Virginia State, little known West Virginia State, they're number 7, WSSU, the Fighting Stephen Gaithers, they're 8th, Savannah State is 9, and Elizabeth City State is 10th. The poll, Jared, kind of reflects what you've been saying about is very CIAA dominant. And I'm not going to disagree with either one of you saying, I believe that, at least so far this season, you can think about the last year. The CIAA has been the most dominant conference of the two. And I don't think it's going to change for a while, unless something strange happens the next 10 or 12 weeks as we head to conference play in late in the season. So, yeah, Jared, I think you're right. The numbers in our poll don't lie. So,
yeah, and I just think Clark Atlanta, they won, but it was not the performance that people wanted to see from them and David Wright in particular. I think the defense has some things that needs to clear up, because that first touchdown they gave up to Allen, that should not have been as wide open. As bad as the view of the stream was, you could still see how wide open that receiver was. There's no reason why they should be having those kind of gaps in coverage. There's no reason why that offense can go from being what looks like the most dominant unit in Division II football in week 1, and then just look like a team that doesn't even look like they belong on the field in week 2. There's no reason why it should go from that drastic of a difference, and I think I want to give Allen credit as well, because they played well defensively. They were energetic. Obviously, they had week 1. This was their first game of the season, so of course they're going to be energetic, and they're playing on. I don't want to say the name that Chris said, because I'm not giving in to those jokes about the red field. But they're playing against their former coach. They want to show, that you shouldn't have left us. We're good without you. And they played like a team that was good without Teddy Keaton and David Wright and all those guys that left to go to Clark Atlanta. They fell short. Clark Atlanta won. You want to give them credit for that. But I feel like, that's not the performance that Clark Atlanta needs if they want to take that next step. Now to talk about little heralded West Virginia State. They won in their season opener against Barton. I want to give them their credit, because we don't get to talk about them much. Joel Felder, who looked like he was going to enter the transfer portal, he did enter the transfer portal, decided to return to West Virginia State and had a big game in his season opener. And had 176 rushing yards on 20-something attempts, had a touchdown. He set the single season record for West Virginia State last season, and looks like he's going to be on pace to do it again this season. Had 6 rushing games of 100 yards last season. He started off the season with 1 this year, so I'll be looking out for him. And who, by the way, was a HBCU Sports Awards nominee for our Offensive Player of the Year. So hopefully he can have another performance that puts him in that discussion. So I'll be looking out for West Virginia State and Joel Felder. And don't be surprised if Joel Felder starts to make some noise in that Buck Buchanan Award trophy sweepstakes. So West Virginia State starts off the season great. Fayetteville State started off the season with a win over UNC Pembroke, battled them into, I believe that game went into overtime. Fayetteville State looking for their 7th straight CIAA championship appearance. I've gone on record in saying that I'm not sure that streak continues. They do have a very light schedule outside of a game, I believe, they either play Virginia Union or Virginia State, And I believe Johnson C. Smith will be a tough task. And it's looking like Shaw could potentially be a tough outing for them this season. So I think they have it stacked up against them, but they started off the season looking very good against UMC Pembroke. And yeah, so those are kind of how my rankings stack up. Virginia Union still at the top of the mountain. Nobody has beaten them yet. You have to knock them off the perch. And they have looked like the best team in Division II football so far. Despite the loss to Hampton, they go back to Division II opponents this weekend, and I think they'll continue to show that they right now are the class of the Division II rankings.
Yeah, Jared Hoffman tonight, he's going out on a lot of big limbs, man, with Division II football. He got his chest way out tonight, man. I like that. Chris, you kind of back what Jared said about like some of these teams that are kind of like lesser known, making some noise at the D2 level.
Yeah, we just mentioned Shaw, but Shaw they've had a very interesting start to their season. They had a 17-3 lead against Elizabeth City State, had to sweat that out in the final minutes, then had to come back from 3 or 4 touchdowns down to beat the SIAC favorite on the road at their place. So we got to start asking the question, are the Shaw Bears for real this time? We've had some years in the past where they've kind of pump faked us a little bit. Like they looked like they were going to be good, and then they weren't. So now we got to start asking the question, are the Shaw Bears for real? We will find out very, very shortly because, of course, they've got Fayetteville State on the schedule. They've got Johnson C. Smith, and again, jokes aside, we can't discount Winston-Salem State either. So this CIAA year is going to be very interesting. Them going back from retreating from divisions and going to just a one-team league, one league, again, is going to be very interesting because you don't know outside of Virginia Union and Virginia State who's really good in that conference, but we will find out very shortly. Yeah,
we certainly will find out. It's going to be fun to see how that all plays out. I'm really excited to follow it throughout the regular season. So, and as Ezra Kelly said, Virginia Union plays JCSU this weekend. That's going to be a very big game, and the game like everybody should be watching who follows both of those schools in that league. But I want to switch topics now. It's not a new topic. It's something that has been talked about for years and years and years. And
we're going to talk about Division I?
Division I? The poll? Oh, yeah, we can do that. Sure. Why not?
Sure. We have it up.
Yeah, so Division I. Yeah, so
that was Division II on the board.
My bad. I got rid of the poll. Hold on.
By the way,
yeah, so we did the Division I poll. It came out this morning. They ranked the top 10 teams in Division I Black College football. And at the top, that's Division II. Okay, producer's messing up. But anyway, number one was FAMU. I mean, not FAMU. Number one was North Carolina Central. Number 2 was FAMU, and number 3 was what, Chris?
Howard,
number 3. Yeah, so those were the top 3 teams in our poll. They went to 10. I can't remember the order because I have it in front of me. But Chris, why did you rank the teams the way you ranked them?
Well, I'm going to pull the poll up just so I don't, mess this up. But, just on my screen. But what I like the most about this weekend. Okay, there we go. All right.
You got Alabama State. Thank you. Producer came through. Alabama State number 4. Morgan State was 5th. Jackson State was 6th. South Carolina State was 7th. Alcorn State was 8th. Tennessee State was 9th, and Southern was 10th. I got a grab about you about South Carolina State though, but continue.
Oh wow, I can't wait to hear this one. North Carolina Central. I struggled with keeping them number 1, to be honest with you, because Elon went in there and just, did they came in there like Stone Cold Steve Austin, here to glass that shit, what, and they did a really good job. I mean, we talked about how important it was going to be for a team to start strong, and Elon scored the first 24 points of the ball game. That was pretty much it. So, Central, I only keep them number 1 because they are going to run into a buzzsaw at Chapel Hill this weekend. So, I mean, this will probably be the last week they'll be number one. Florida A&M couldn't move them from number 2 because, I mean, of course, they played Miami. And not Miami of Ohio. Shouts out to Ben Roethlisberger. Actually, no, we don't want to shout out Ben Roethlisberger. But Miami, Florida, and they've had a really good run to start the season, so I couldn't hold that against Florida A&M. Howard, however, they were up against Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst is a brand new Division I school, FCS. Howard was up 21-3. They ended up winning that game 32-31 on a last-second field goal. Talked to Larry Scott about that this morning before my internet cut out. He said it just proves that you got to play 60 minutes of football. So, Howard, they are where they are. Alabama State deserves to keep the spot because their defense did what they were supposed to do against Miles, and their quarterback situation is still very unsettled. They have a couple of freshmen that are going to be seeing a little bulk of the minutes. James Hayes and Zach Sims talked to Eddie. Kendrick talked to Eddie Robinson this morning, and Coach Robinson hopes that Andrew Body will still be a central figure. He'll be like the unofficial quarterback coach for that young team. Why don't you take the thing now, Kendrick? I was still, All right, there we go. All right, number 5, Morgan State. Like I said, they went back to their old offensive struggles against Towson. That was a game they should have won. Absolutely, that was a game they should have won. Number 6, Jackson State. Yes, Kendrick is upset they gave up a touchdown, but 58-7, all things considered, not bad. South Carolina State, they beat the Citadel for Chennis Berry's first Division I win, and most likely won't be his last. Alcorn State, I switched them out because Alcorn State was 7 last week and South Carolina State was 8 last week. And people are going to say, Chris, but they played Vanderbilt this week. I think it was Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can't hold losing 2 FCS games against Alcorn State, but at the same time, I want to give South Carolina State their flowers because they should have beat Florida A&M. They couldn't get it done, but they went into the Citadel, a notoriously tough place to play, got it done. Tennessee State, can't dock them for North Dakota State because North Dakota State should have beat Colorado, and Colorado is a whole separate issue all to itself. We need to really, I'm going to take a victory lap about Colorado later on in the season. I guarantee it. Southern, meanwhile, they took care of business against Savannah State, so they deserve to remain in the top 10. So the top 10 to me is really, I don't see much change until these schools start playing each other. I mean, unless one of these schools pulls off like the upset of all upsets when they play their FCS teams or they get upset by another Division II in the next couple of weeks. I feel like this is the order that'll stay until we really get into the meat and potatoes of conference season.
Yeah, like for my money, Chris, I like the poll, but for South Carolina State, I think because of the way they played their first 2 games, they should have beaten Florida A&M, and they went on the road and they beat the Citadel. Those were 2 tough opponents. You got some schools ahead of them, even behind them, that played up and down. The first couple of weeks, I thought South Carolina State probably should be a little bit higher. I don't know where higher, but they probably should have got a little bit more credit for just the schedule they played and like how they played in those games. But I think the rest of the poll is good. I mean, like the first couple of weeks of the season, it's going to be muddy. You really don't know how good these teams are. We kind of talked about that earlier in the show. So yeah, like I think as the season goes on, everything will sort itself out. So yeah, like I think South Carolina State though should have been a little bit higher. But other than that, the poll's fine.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so moving on to a topic that really isn't an old one. We talked about this a lot over the years, especially around this time of the year in our conference play, when we have seen Division I black colleges play against FBS conferences and even Power 5, now Power 4 conferences. And there's much consternation about like why these games exist, why our black colleges are playing these games, why they're prostituting themselves to play in these games. And you hear arguments from all across the spectrum about this particular topic. Real Sports a couple years ago did a whole segment about it where they kind of like sensationalized like the games and how it impacts black colleges. And there's one prominent former black college football player who you all know and love. Well, most of you know and love. Has some comments on his show about HBCU money games and how they should be valued by Black colleges.
Yes, sir.
HBCUs. When these big Power 5 schools ask you to come, don't y'all take less than $1 million, and y'all make them pay for y'all travel.
Yeah.
Northern Illinois got $1.4 million to travel to South Bend, Indiana. How far is that trip? How far is Northern Illinois from South Bend?
Illinois.
They be paying these schools, and no, Joe. By the time I pay for travel, and they guess what? They always require you to bring the band.
Oh, the band ain't even go. The band ain't even go. Nah, the band ain't go. It's right down the street.
They normally require.
Matter of fact, you know what? Maybe it was only 700,000 because Tallahassee is right down the street. That ain't nothing but a hip and a scot.
Nah, I need a meal. I need a meal.
Right.
At least a meal. They got it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Private institution. They got it. Big time.
They got it. I ain't coming less than a meal. And you're gonna play for my travel. Because hell, Ocho, by the time if I bring all them players up, charter a flight, that's 200,000.
Yeah. So
now guess how much did I get? I go to the hotel, Ocho,
put everybody up.
Put them up for a night. That's another 50,000.
You probably walk away with 4 and some change.
Yeah. Nah, I need to walk away. I need to walk away with 700 to $1 million. I'm paying, guess what? Because I'm paying for the whole at damn near the athletic, but you're gonna come out of that. Because that's what you do, don't you? That's what you're doing. You trying to supplement your athletic program with that ass whipping that you know you're gonna take. So that's what I'm telling. Because I remember, I think Savannah State, they played Miami. I think they played Oklahoma State. Got beat like 84-0 or something for like 400,000. I said, oh hell no. Nah.
84 points.
84.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good, FAMU. We good.
Yeah, so that was Shannon Sharp, host of Nightcap and co-host of First Take in Club Shay Shay. He's a very busy man. With Chad Ochocinco talking about why he believes that Black colleges should get no less than $1 million to play FBS schools. Fellas, what we got to say about this? Chris, you have very strong thoughts about this topic. Is Shannon Sharp right, or is he delusional?
I want to shout out Chuck Hunt, who made a great point in the chat. He says Notre Dame has that old money. They can afford to pay. What people are going to discover about this new era of college athletics is there's a lot of, this is the second time I've made a gang reference on this show, and people are going to be like, kind of clutching their pearls about this, but there's a lot of false flagging going on about folks' athletic budgets. Like, we're really going to find out who's big, who has big bank and whose little bank is going to get took. Because there's a lot of, schools that are supposed, Shannon Sharp is trying to say that they should be paying $1 million that don't have $1 million themselves. Like, people go, does Hawaii have 180? Does Hawaii have $1 million? No, they don't. Does Miami probably have $1 million? Probably, but Morgan State's going to play Ohio this week. Ohio's greatest athlete is the greatest third baseman to ever play baseball, Michael Jack Schmidt. And I don't think Mike Schmidt ever made enough money to put $1 million in the Ohio Bobcat coffers. So you really have to be honest with yourself about these athletic programs that have perceived higher, I don't want to say standards, the word I look for, higher, clout. They just as broke as the rest of us. Some of them have wealthy donors, most of them don't. So, I mean, if we're talking Power 5, yes, absolutely. There was no way Savannah State should have got anything less than $1 million for that, Cobra clutch they received from Oklahoma State that year. But if we're talking about just like regular FBS schools, like outside of that Power 5 or Power 4 context, Like, I don't think Vanderbilt has $1 million. I know UAB ain't got it. UAB might end up firing Trent Dilfer after they just got their butts whooped by Louisiana Monroe this weekend. So, I mean, yes, it's nice to say that we should be able to get that level of money, but not every school, despite the higher status, that's what I meant, the higher status that they are perceived to have, has that $1 million laying around. I do agree with the travel, though. The travel gets real expensive. Pay for the travel and make sure you can walk away with at least $500,000. But just, talking about walking there, demand $1 million, try to drop it on the table. That's just not how it's going to work.
Yeah, I'll let Jared go for our time with my thoughts. Jared, what say you about this phenomenon?
I think it's important to note that Shannon specifically said when the Power Fives, when we play the Power Fives, well, now it's Power Four, but he specifically said Power Fives. So he didn't say FBS schools. So schools in the MAC conference, Mountain West Conference, those schools, although they are FBS, he was referring to the Power Four. So that's ACC, Big Ten, not Pac-12 anymore, but SEC, and who am I forgetting?
Big Ten.
Big Ten. Yeah, there you go. So even having said that, right, I don't claim to be knowledgeable about how, those negotiations go for those games, with those money games. But what I will say is 500,000 is shortening us. That's shortening us for sure. 500,000, that should be the low end. We should not take any less than 500,000. I know that for a fact. Based on the numbers that I have seen from the numbers games and what teams get for playing against those Power 5, Power 4 now schools, 500,000 should be on the low end what we get to play against a Power 5 school. You know what I mean? Especially when we're playing against programs like UNC, when we play against UCLA, when we play against and Notre Dame, who, by the way, paid Tennessee State $1 million when they played Tennessee State, even though Notre Dame is independent and they're not Power 5. We know that Notre Dame has that money. You know that they have that money. So, I don't think that I'm not sure we are in the position to demand $1 million. I'm not sure we're in that position to make demands, because we got to remember that there are other FCS programs that are playing in money games too. You had North Dakota State who played Colorado. You had Sacramento State who played against Stanford and beat Stanford last year. You have all these FCS powers who are playing against these Power 5 programs as well. So they're bargaining for that game as well. You know what I mean? So we have to be cautious about our mindset in terms of what we feel like we deserve to play in these games, because those games are important. I don't care what anybody says. Those money games are important to just lend a little bit of help to our athletic programs, to our football programs. So I don't want to speak on whether or not we should be demanding $1 million, because I honestly don't know how those negotiations go. But I can say, by looking at the numbers and the payouts, how they have been distributed in years past, that 500,000 should be our low end. It absolutely should be our low end. And it mainly has to do, I think Chris said it, that it mainly has to do with the institution that we are playing. If we're playing, like I said, Alabama, if we're playing Auburn, if we're playing Miami, who is paying, I believe, 700,000. No, not 700,000. They play like 500,000 to they played seven. They're paying Florida A&M 700,000 for their game. So 700,000 is a good amount for a Miami to play against Miami, because that Miami has it. But I think with that we should stop the discussions of don't take it for any less than this, because we'll start. I don't. I'm gonna just leave it at that. That I don't think that we should be demanding it.
Yeah, here's my 2 cents on it. most schools play money games, whether they're FCS or FBS. Probably the best FCS team in the last 20 years, North Dakota State, they play at Colorado, nearly beat them. They got paid $700,000 for that game, which is the same amount of money that FAMU got to play against Miami last week. And I know Prairie View is going to play at Michigan State, a Big Ten school. They're going to get $500,000 to play in that one. I know last year LSU paid Grambling State $850,000. So the bigger schools are giving out more money. As Chris mentioned, Notre Dame did reimburse Tennessee State $1 million for that butt whooping that they put on them last year in South Bend. But like, here's the thing: like, everybody plays money games. Like the games you see in the FBS level, where you got a G5 school playing against Alabama and a G5 school playing against Oklahoma the first week of the season. That's a money game. That's a money game for them. And the payout might be a little different because normally Division I schools at the upper echelon, they pay more to play fellow, and those don't get the same amount that a G5 school would get. That's just the reality of it. I know we wish they all get more, but that's how that structure normally works. And the payouts, as Chris mentioned,
What did Chris mention?
Bad internet bug, man.
Man, it's going around like crazy, man.
Yeah, man, it's like a virus. But as I was saying though, like depending on the budgets, like because multiple schools are playing multiple non-conference games, and so some schools like a MAC school or a school from the Sun Belt, they can't afford to pay like $1 million to an HBCU or any school for that game. I know Jack State only got like what $350 to play ULM the first week of the season. I mean, that's helpful to the university, but it's not $1 million either. So, like, what do you do? And plus, like, these games are important, as Jared mentioned. Number one, to play games. Number two, to, like, get stuff on tape for players. Because a lot of players, lo and behold, they get on NFL scouts' radars based off these games. Like, players like the Kobe Durant, who now starts for the Rams. He played against Clemson. He locked down some of their wide receivers in that game, despite the fact South Carolina State got blown out. But scouts were impressed by that, ended up being drafted in the 4th round because of it. That's just one example of like why these games are important. Now, I know like we don't like the prospect of these teams getting beat down or embarrassed or possibly hurt, but like, I mean, was anybody crying for Lane when they lost by 58 points to Dallas State? That's a money game for them. Tuskegee played Grambling. That was a money game. I don't know the parameters of like all these payouts when we play money games with other HBCUs, but I do know that Tuskegee got $60,000 for playing Grambling, and that's not very much money to take a whooping for at least a half at least. Yeah, so like I know everybody's upset. Well, why are we playing these games? Because they got 85 scholarships and we have 60 plus scholarships. It's not fair. Like it's wrong. But like in there, it's football. Like guys can get hurt playing against black colleges. Guys can get hurt playing against North Dakota State. Everybody wants us to play against North Dakota State. Well, shoot, they are a Power 4 school masquerading as an FCS school. They can hurt you too. And Tennessee State found that out this weekend. So yeah, like I mean, like it's just the way business is done because college football, no matter what the level is very, very expensive. And a lot of money that supports it does not come from these money games. It will never come from these money games. They come, especially at the FBS level, from television revenue, from advertising, and a small percentage comes from donors, but like for the most of it comes from television money. If some of these schools were not in these Power 4 conferences like the Big Ten or the SEC, or they're getting like multi-million dollars based off these television contracts, they'd be struggling like the match schools too. And we know that for sure. They would be struggling like the match schools too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like Shannon Sharp made his point, but I disagree with it. Like nobody's going to come in and say, hey, we need to pay $1 million for you to play us. Nobody's going to do that. It's especially when you're a lower level school. So that's how I feel about it. I mean, y'all may disagree with it, but I think too much is being made of areas. This is happening like for years and years and years. Like these games will continue happening, maybe to a lesser extent, since now the college football playoff has expanded, where schools are heavily evaluated based on their schedule now. So you may see less of these games in the future. But yeah, like it's kind of like no big deal. Like this is like every year. Schools are willing to play these games. So why are we complaining about it at the end of the day? Any final thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Let's be clear about it. Like, because we could go on a macro level and talk about how we're forced to play these games because our schools, at least the public schools, have been woefully underfunded for generations. Like, we've done stories where Tennessee State and Alabama A&M are owed nearly $1 billion separately, not combined, but each school is owed nearly $1 billion by the state, and the state won't cough it up. So if it's going on in Tennessee and Alabama, it's going on in Kentucky, it's going on in Georgia, it's going on in Texas, it's going on in Delaware. Even though it's only the two schools that anybody really cares about is UD and Del State, but UD has been outpacing Del State in funding forever. So it's on a macro level. I mean, it's the reason we're forced to play these games. If we had equal funding, then no, we wouldn't have to go, just say, hey, play something for these, play the song that the band wants to hear. Like Arkansas Pine Bluff played Cody Rhodes' theme song for the folks at Arkansas. And I love that song, but I did not like to hear that song in the context of them getting their butts whooped by Arkansas. So, but it's just one of them things where you have to deal with it until the situation gets better, or we find a way to make it better.
Yeah, and that's going to take like a lot of work from the school standpoint and fighting for what we're owed outside of like asking a Power 5 school for more money to play a football game. Like Chris mentioned, like a lot of states have for years stripped schools an opportunity to get what they're owed in terms of like state funding. Like in some states, like black colleges are owned millions, or something, in cases of billions of dollars from like a generation ago, and they're just now getting around to saying, "Oh, we probably should give these black folks the money that they owe." Yeah, so that's part of the reason why a lot of athletic departments aren't up to the same standards as some of the other ones you see around the country, because we as black colleges have been put in a position where the government has not respected us as institutions and as people and decided we are lesser than, and in fact, we don't need money to run a school. So yeah, that's the unfortunate part about it.
Yeah, and just the last thing I'll say on it is that I can understand why Shannon said what he said about what we should demand for playing against Power Fives. Because at the end of the day, compared to Power Fives, they're not going to be hurting for that money. They're just not. Let's just be honest. They're not. But I think that saying that we should demand it is a dangerous precedent to set for any of our mainly FCS HBCUs who are in more of a position to play against those Power Fives. I think I just think that's a dangerous precedent. You know what I mean? And for anybody who doesn't understand about our funding issues and why we have such financial, I don't want to say financial problems, because I don't want to put that stigma out there that all HBCUs have financial problems, but the financial deficit that we face compared to other institutions, do your research about the underfunding that we talk about every year with our HBCUs and how woefully underfunded our institutions are. The state of Maryland just paid us a couple of years ago, and even that doesn't make a dent in the amount of money that they owe us. So for anybody who thinks that we just talk to hear ourselves speak, no, go and do your research. You know what I mean? Because that all we're asking for is for you to care about our institutions, because we're going to be great regardless. We produce greatness regardless of the field. Athletics, we got it. In the medical field, we got it. In the field of law, we got it. In the field of government, we about to have a president in a couple of months, maybe. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about producing greatness, we can do that regardless of how much you underpay us. But we can continue to be great and be great on a larger scale if we were taken care of the way that we are supposed to be, the way that these big institutions are. Not to say that we should be paid like these big institutions, but care for us like you care for those big institutions is what I should probably say. So the money games, we're going to continue to play them. We're going to continue to advocate for the best for our institutions. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah. And we'll leave it right there. Thanks for joining us again on another Monday night. Thanks for all your comments in the chat. Shout out to Doc Holiday with HBCU Overdrive for stopping by. EA chimed in a couple times tonight. Unfortunately, Cameron Showers not here. I don't know what the hell he's doing tonight. But we hope you come back and join us again later on in the week on Wednesday for our roundtable. We're going to have a nice array of topics again this week. And remember, to support our channel, you can become a number 1, number 2, or number 3 level member for $4.99. To support the work we do, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you can get more videos like this, and follow all of our work on our website. For Kendrick, it's this Chris, there's Jared. We're out.